In my eyes, Lady Gaga defined the 2010s, not just influencing pop music, but fandom, politics, fashion, technology, celebrity culture, and culture as a whole. The 2010s saw the power of new technology collide with the aftermath of 2000s celebrity obsession, forever changing the concepts of communication, celebrity, music, and even politics. It was truly the start of a whole new era where we would learn to support our idols all through the internet, a tidal wave of change that was completely understood and preempted by the young Lady Gaga. In turn, she would go on to use all of these new avenues of communication to further her message and art as far as it could go. This is how Lady Gaga changed the world. Fandom. When celebrities first started setting up their accounts on social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter, it was very normal for them to have, as a New York Times article put it in 2009, ghost Twitterers, who would update fans on the artist's latest projects, often imitating the artist's voice. A good example of this is Rihanna's earliest tweets, which aren't written in that sassy tweeting style that we've all come to know and are most probably written by someone else. Around this time, the level of relatability and equality a pop star had with their fans was basically nothing, and if a fan wanted to interact with their idol, they had to enter some kind of fan competition where they would be competing with thousands of other fans. Then came in Lady Gaga. Right from the start, her campaign for stardom was very much a grassroots campaign, and she used every social media platform she could to build a relationship with her fans, nurture them and bring them together. That might seem not at all extraordinary in today's age, where worldwide superstars like Ariana Grande regularly talks to her fans on Twitter, and we can watch and interact with artists on Instagram whenever we want. However, before the whole world got onto the internet and we all became equal on the democratized playing field of social media, there was absolutely no precedent that artists had to have any type of interaction or relatability with their fans, and the idea that an artist would somehow be regularly interacting with fans was non-existent. From tweeting out hourly updates on her latest moves on Twitter to creating weekly video diaries, Gaga Visions, on her YouTube channel, Gaga helped to revolutionize the relationship between artist and fan and change the very concept of what it meant to be a fan. You have to understand, pre-internet and pre-Gaga, the fan, before it became elevated to the stan, did not have the power and visibility it has in popular culture today. Of course, crazy fans have existed since the beginning of popular music, even before, but the difference between the crazy fans of Michael Jackson and the crazy fans of Lady Gaga is Gaga's fans had an idol who saw herself on the same level as them, even below them, even if she really wasn't, and acted accordingly. Gaga was the first artist ever to make the fans part of the project. I want you to think now, whoever or whatever you stan, it could be an artist or a TV show, how much power and visibility you have as a fan. Does your fandom have a name? Do you regularly see people from your fandom interacting with your idol? Has your fandom ever been reported on in the media? Now I'm going to read you an excerpt from the manifesto of Little Monsters that appeared in the super deluxe version of the Fame Monster. There's something heroic about the way my fans operate their cameras, like kings writing the history of their people. It's their prolific nature that both creates and procures what will be later perceived as the kingdom. So the real truth about Lady Gaga fans lies in this sentiment. They are the kings, they are the queens. They write the history of the kingdom, while I am something of a devoted jester. Operating their cameras, creating what will be perceived as the kingdom, they are the kings, I am a devoted jester. Does that remind you of modern stardom today? The way that Twitter stans will flood any kind of post with their lovingly made fan cams, further spreading the message of whatever kingdom they belong to. The way that artists are so often now the toys of their fandom, their devoted jester, being treated as if they are the playthings on the same level as their fans. And the way that idols can now be cancelled at the drop of a hat if a fandom is angry enough. By giving her power over to the fans, Gaga revolutionized what it meant to be one, and the Little Monsters, as she lovingly named them back in 2009, were the first of their kind to be reported on in the media as a veritable collective. However, none of this would have been possible without the internet, and if the Little Monsters didn't have somewhere to assemble and organize, fandoms would have never have reached where they are today. After Gaga created, nurtured and named the Little Monsters, other pop fandoms soon followed and the state of the fan grew to where it is today. The power we have as fans today, where we can interact with our favorite artists, become friends with people who share the same fandom, and hyperactively follow our idols' every move, is largely due to Lady Gaga and the Little Monsters. Politics. In the 2010s, politics worldwide had two new players, celebrities and the power of Twitter. Of course, prominent figures from across society have been involved in the running of lands since the beginning of time, but it is only recently that every prominent figure, every big celebrity is expected, almost demanded, to share their support for every political cause in the mainstream, and I believe Lady Gaga has a big hand to play in that. The first decade of the 21st century was not a banner time for social conscientiousness in pop music. The 2000s were marked with an undying attitude for debauchery, opulence, and decadence, and it was very much reflected in the music. Sure, there were exceptions every now and then with Christina Aguilera's Beautiful, the Black Eyed Peas' Where Is the Love, and a couple amazing Kanye West tracks, but it was definitely not the era of exploring progressive ideals in music. It also wasn't an era where stars were automatically expected to show their support for every political cause in the mainstream, and even if they did, they weren't attacked if that support happened to be for the other side of the mainstream.
A lot of entertainers have come out against the war in Iraq. Have you?
Honestly, I think we should just trust our president in every decision that he makes, and we should just support that, you know, and be faithful in what happens.
Do you trust this president?
Yes, I do.
God forbid you support a side that your listeners don't. In comes Lady Gaga. At the beginning of her career, she definitely wasn't the most politically active star out there by any stretch. However, as her career progressed and she became more and more involved with her LGBT fans, identifying their struggle with being an outcast with her own, Gaga started to feel the need to do something that would give back even a little bit of the love that she had received from the LGBT community. She was the first major star to get involved with the campaign to end Don't Ask, Don't Tell in the United States and the campaign to legalize same-sex marriage. Before anyone else, Gaga was speaking out on these important causes when most stars would be scared of alienating their audience. She was speaking out at a time when it still wasn't seen as cool or the norm to support progressive issues, and she was supporting the LGBT community before it became normal to do so. It was a while before RuPaul's Drag Race, open thoughts to sexuality, and gay lingo.
Yes, Gaga, you look so good.
Ever existed in the mainstream. Most importantly, Gaga also spread the same messages in her art. She wore the meat dress at the 2010 VMAs as a protest against Don't Ask, Don't Tell, stating in an interview,
"The moral and ethical and political implication of that outfit was far beyond what most people think, which is ew." Right? Ew. Right? But the reality of it is, I was there with 4 soldiers that had been discharged under the pretense of don't ask, don't tell. And you know what I was really trying to say was dead meat is dead meat. And anyone that's willing to take their life and die for their country is the same. You're not gay and dead, straight and dead, you are dead.
And most famously, Gaga released her powerful pride anthem, Born This Way, as an unashamed cry of self-declaration for LGBT people all over the world. I want to write my This Is Who the I Am anthem, but I don't want it to be hidden in poetic wizardry and metaphors. I want it to be an attack, an assault on the issue, because I think, especially in today's music, everything gets kinda washy sometimes and the message gets hidden in the lyrical play. The music video even inspired the creation of the MTV Video with a Message Award, of which Gaga is the inaugural winner. By supporting different social causes through her music and outreach, Gaga inspired a whole new generation of stars to get involved with social causes, as well as helping to shine a light on different progressive movements already happening. Gaga used the power of her celebrity to make real change for people she cared about, as well as encouraging all of her followers to get involved. Fashion. Many people would say that Lady Gaga has had no impact on fashion and has only created some memorable looks in her own work. And judging purely from popular 2010s fashion trends, that may seem true. But if you look a little closer, you will see that Gaga has had a major influence on both clothing in popular culture and the very fabric of the fashion world itself. The relationship between fashion and music today is very different to what it was 10 years ago. Pre-Gaga, it was very rare for high fashion editorial stylists and major fashion houses to work directly with musicians, and usually only the most popular musicians were given pieces from a designer's collection, usually obtained by a regular celebrity stylist. Gaga's former stylist, Nicola Formichetti, described the situation. When I started working with Gaga, it was taboo for a fashion stylist to team up with musicians. I thought I could merge fashion and music together, and we did something really amazing. At the time, it was unheard of for a fashion person to work with music people. It feels like such a normal thing today, but 7 years ago, no one did that. Music stylists were just doing music people, and fashion stylists would never touch music people. I loved her and wanted to work with her, even though those around me were not really supportive. Of course, fashion has been an important part of popular music since its inception. You had the mods in the 60s, the hippies and punks in the 70s, the new romantics in the 80s, and grunge in the 90s. However, designer clothing, especially haute couture, had never been part of the equation until Lady Gaga. In the beginning, designers weren't especially keen to work with Gaga. There was no precedent for a major fashion house to work with an up-and-coming singer, no matter how promising. Nicola often had to lie and say the clothes he was borrowing were in fact for an editorial. For her first high-fashion video, Paparazzi, the video stylist B. Akerlund had a hard time obtaining many of the pieces you see in the video, like the Mugler robot suit you see in the beginning of the video and the Dolce & Gabbana bustier dress seen right at the end. Even though the video propelled Gaga to a new level of stardom, she still wasn't accepted into high fashion circles until her magnum opus, Bad Romance, was released. For the video, Alexander McQueen, who was an extremely big fan of Gaga, allowed Nicola to take whatever pieces he liked from his Spring-Summer 2010 collection, Plato's Atlantis. You can see the marks of McQueen all over the video, from the dress she wears right in the beginning to the white sculptured pumps you see in the famous bathtub scene. After that video, the whole fashion world took notice, and soon enough, every designer was begging to dress her, in her videos, on the stage, and on the red carpet. When Giorgio Armani dressed Gaga for the 2010 Grammys red carpet, he understood that he had to completely change the style of restraint and the color greige to match Gaga's. And as you couldn't compete with Gaga for headlines dressing like that, soon every female pop star started to up their game. The red carpet became a competition for who could pull off the most daring outfit, and two of her peers seemed to try especially hard to out Gaga each time. But the influence didn't just stop there. You could see the high fashion extraterrestrial looks in all of her peers' videos, who, having only recently been occupied with girl next door vibes and safe family friendly dressing, had suddenly become enamored with dark visuals, haute couture and BDSM inspired clothing. Everyone from Christina Aguilera to Beyonce was taking notice. However, it's a myth that Gaga's fashion influence only lasted for a short period in the early 10s, and Gaga actually played a big part in bringing the BDSM stripper aesthetic into the pop music mainstream. Before Gaga, there had been several attempts at bringing kink culture into pop culture, most notably Madonna's Erotica album and photo book, both of which were heavily criticized at the time and pushed Madonna's career into new lows. However, attempts in the fashion world fared much better, and in 1992, Versace devoted a whole collection called Miss S&M to the underground phenomenon, a collection from which Gaga actually wore a piece in 2010. It was in the Fame Monster era that Gaga started experimenting with darker BDSM-inspired visuals, and this is also the era where we start to see much of Gaga's visual iconography take form. The extremely tall high heels, often made by pleaser shoes, the latex clothing, the leather clothing, and the bondage-style straps and harnesses found in many of her outfits of this period. Of course, I'm not saying at all that Gaga created any of these looks, but she was the first to bring these aspects of BDSM culture into the mainstream successfully, and it started to show in many of her peers' outfits over the next few years. However, like I said previously, Gaga's influence is not just limited to actual clothing trends in the 2010s, but the actual fabric of the fashion world itself. Here's how. Ever since Anna Wintour had been appointed editor-in-chief at Vogue US in 1988, she'd been making radical changes to the way Vogue was ran and, in extension, the fashion industry. It was in her 10th year as Vogue's editor-in-chief that the magazine really started to move forward into the rapidly growing world of celebrity, which would soon have its claws digged into every part of society, and in 1998, there were more celebrities featured on the cover than ever. It was also the first time that a celebrity, Renee Zellweger, was featured on the cover of the September issue, a practice that would become so popular in the 2000s that from 2004 to 2010, there were no models featured on the cover of Vogue. Of course, the first person to be put on the September issue after Kate Moss in 2011 would be Gaga herself in 2012. Why is any of this important? Along with Anna Wintour, Lady Gaga helped to shift the spinning point of fashion from one that was purely based in financial and class-based elitism to one that was strongly based in the power of celebrity. Although that might seem a strange concept in today's world where celebrities line every fashion show, they feature on every magazine cover, they attend every important fashion event, and they are used to sell everything from Alexander Wang to Prada, there used to be a time where the worlds of pop music and high fashion didn't align as they do so easily today, and unless you were at the Oscars, the red carpet wasn't in abundance of designer everything, who are you wearing, and certainly not haute couture. There was no understanding between the worlds of fashion and pop culture of the power they could have if they bound together. Gaga played a part in changing this in two ways. The first is the Met Gala. What is now a widely reported on celebrity event fixed into the cultural calendar didn't always used to be that way. Before the 2010s, the Met Gala was still somewhat of an important event. Celebrities still tried to dress somewhat according to the theme, and the event was still reported on somewhat. But the number of iconic looks imprinted onto our shared cultural memory each year were few and far between compared to the monstrous number of looks turned out each year in May nowadays. Well, before we were all in a pandemic. As you can see from this Google search trends chart, I will make no attempt in saying it was Gaga who really put the Met Gala onto the map in terms of the public consciousness. That was definitely Rihanna in 2015. However, it was Gaga performing at the Met Gala in 2010 that first helped to showcase what the potential of the Met Gala could be. Don't believe me?
Lady Gaga performed at this one. It now became like 10 times bigger. Everybody and anybody was at the Met. It's a great turnout for fashion in our industry. It's our Oscars.
All you have to do is look at the outfits before and after 2010 to see the difference. By helping to transform the Met Gala, Gaga helped to change the core of fashion from one solely based on financial and class-based elitism to the nauseating new world of celebrity everything, celebrity everywhere, celebrity everyone. Which brings us to our second point. Along with Anna Wintour and Gaga's own team of amazing fashion-forward stylists, Gaga helped to meld the two worlds of high fashion and haute couture and celebrity together. When those two worlds previously would have been as complementary as 2000s era Kim Kardashian at the Met Gala, now coexist harmoniously. Most of the time. By appropriating high fashion into pop culture, Gaga made pop culture a high fashion event and completely smashed previous perceptions as to what was possible on the red carpet. She was wearing vintage Mugler and haute couture art pieces to every event at a time when Bjork's swan dress was called the dumbest thing ever and made her look like a refugee from the more dog-eared precincts of Provincial Ballet. Nowadays we have Katy Perry wearing a chandelier to the Met Gala, and no one cares because Gaga broke everyone's shock factor. To bring it back to Gaga's former stylist, Nicola Formichetti,
you had said that, you were interested in music and then you were interested in fashion. These are two, very close things.
I was talking to him about shooting Gaga. I mean, at that time, it was not very popular if you work in fashion, you don't work with musicians.
Think about Nicola and how he did such a fantastic job with Gaga.
Okay.
And how that, every time she walked from her hotel bedroom to the limousine, it was your catwalk. You dressed her. She was, with the respect, I know that Gaga's her own being, but you dressed her. And every time you sent, millions of pictures of that particular moment go out. If you do a fashion show, not necessarily that many pictures go out.
Yeah.
So sort of, the involvement of a huge celebrity like Lady Gaga really changes the fashion world. She really did. She had lots of young designers that you dressed her in, became well known and became, that's.
But now, we have Cardi B partnering with Balenciaga, Emma Chamberlain working with Louis Vuitton, and Charli D'Amelio working with Prada. If it wasn't for Gaga helping to transform the Met Gala into a celebrity event and appropriating high fashion into pop culture to make it a high fashion event, we wouldn't have the state of fashion and pop culture as it is today. Even Nicola is working with, of all people, Dixie D'Amelio, which shows you just how different the worlds of fashion, celebrity, and music are today. Pop music. Like every pop music great that came before her, Lady Gaga changed pop music in two ways. Firstly, she changed the actual sound of pop music in a way that affected all music that came after it. And secondly, just like the Beatles transforming pop music into a conceptual experience and Michael Jackson transforming it into a visual experience, Lady Gaga changed the very concept of what pop music is. But to fully understand how much Gaga changed pop music and pop culture, we have to go back to a world where there was no Gaga. In the 2000s, pop music was a long way away from its 80s inception, having been through several transformational phases to reach its current R&B and hip-hop infused sound. After the breakdown of pop in the early 90s, with Michael Jackson's abuse allegations scorching his career and Madonna's erotica album and photo book doing the same, pop went through several filters to get back to its former glory. In the late 90s, Mariah Carey, TLC and Aaliyah combined R&B with pop music to create a completely new sound, and then Timbaland, Pharrell and will.i.am combined hip-hop elements with that sound, which created that iconic rhythmic 2000s R&B pop sound that we all know and love today. However, along the way, pop music had lost a lot of what made it so special in the first place. The performance art, the mythology, the iconography, and combined with the reality stars and gossip blogs of the 2000s, stardom had lost its touch. As well as the decline in the state of pop music, the biggest pop star at the time, Britney Spears, had just exploded the last remnants of teen pop with her dark pop album Blackout, as well as her very public breakdown at the time. So there was a big hole in pop music and a question of what's next. In 2007, Gaga was working with her then producer Red One on creating a sound that would bring R&B, dance, and synth pop elements into her then glam rocker / singer-songwriter style. What they worked on would eventually become the beginning of EDM and electropop, and when the Fame was eventually released on August 19, 2008, it took the world by storm. Suddenly, that question of what's next in pop music was answered, and pop music got a whole new sound to play with, one that was reminiscent of the 80s only 20 years back, but took the electronic elements of that era to the next level. It didn't take long for Gaga's competitors to adapt to the new sound, and soon we were hearing EDM-inspired, synth-filled dance pop albums from all the biggest pop stars. Katy Perry took a complete 180 from her previous pop-punk style and went full electropop princess with her synth-heavy, pure pop bible Teenage Dream. Rihanna put out her EDM-heavy, hit-filled Loud in 2010, in contrast to her previous R&B and hip-hop inspired work. And Christina Aguilera put out her Gaga tribute album Bionic, also in 2010. What Gaga also brought back was the self-mythologizing iconoclast pop star. Since the emergence of teen pop in the early 2000s, pop music had lost its artistic ambition and highbrow value. When we once had such stratospheric stars such as Prince, Whitney Houston, Michael Jackson and Madonna, whose lives and works were complete universes in and of themselves, we now had uninspiring and unambitious teen boppers, whose music didn't belong to any other mythical world apart from the one it existed in. By treating Lady Gaga as her own ever-changing art project, Gaga brought back the self-important, self-mythologizing iconoclast pop star and made pop highbrow again. By treating each album as its own small universe with its own look and sound within the larger Gaga universe, Gaga made pop music feel conceptual and interesting again, like it was high art after it had lost a lot of its spark during the teen pop revolution. However, like I said before, as well as changing the sound and shape of pop music, Gaga also changed its concept. Like Michael Jackson before her, who incorporated new technology at the time to revolutionize pop into a visual experience, Lady Gaga revolutionized pop music by exploiting the digital revolution at the beginning of the 2010s to turn pop music into a new fan-controlled experience. Now, you may say that online fan culture was always going to happen and that it had nothing to do with Lady Gaga, but like with all innovation, it's about who got there first. And if it wasn't for Lady Gaga exploiting every new social media network in the late 2000s, especially Twitter, and incorporating her fans through the technology to become a part of the Lady Gaga universe, the state of fandoms today likely wouldn't be what it is. Secondly, you may say that fans and fandoms have existed since the beginning of popular music, but I'm not saying that Lady Gaga invented the fan. Lady Gaga made the fan visible. Lady Gaga gave the fan a name. Lady Gaga brought the fan along for every step of the ride, and Lady Gaga made the fan important. You have to remember, pre-Gaga, just because you were a fan of an artist, it didn't mean that you had any importance or relevance, and if you did become known as a fan, you were ridiculed as a crazy person. Lady Gaga gave the fan respect, and because of that, the concept of pop music and pop culture as an artist-controlled experience was completely flipped on its head. Lady Gaga's greatest gift and innovation to pop music and pop culture isn't her music, it isn't her fashion, and it isn't her art. It's what she gave to the fans, no matter who or what they idolized. Never forget the manifesto of Little Monsters, no matter how cheesy it sounds to you, her most important gift to this earth.
This is the manifesto of Little Monsters. There's something heroic about the way my fans operate their cameras. So precisely, so intricately, and so proudly. Like kings writing the history of their people. It's their prolific nature that both creates and procures what will later be perceived as the kingdom. So, the real truth about Lady Gaga fans, my little monsters, lies in this sentiment. They are the kings. They are the queens. They write the history of the kingdom. And I am something of a devoted jester. It is in the theory of perception that we have established our bond, or the lie, I should say, for which we kill. We are nothing without our image, without our projection, without the spiritual hologram of who we perceive ourselves to be, or rather to become, in the future. When you're lonely, I'll be lonely too, and this is the fame. Love and Art, 12/18/1974, Lady Gaga.
After Gaga's early rejuvenation and simultaneous evisceration of the pop star back in the late 2000s and early 2010s, the ever-changing hand of pop took a knife onto its own self with art pop and moved onto the minimalist, depressing, relatable second half of the decade. Many people placed Miley Cyrus and Lorde against each other back in the day, as if Lorde was a rejuvenating Christ to Miley's devilish music. However, I think a much better comparison can be made between Lady Gaga and Lorde and art pop and pure heroin. Both coming out near the end of 2013, one marked the last dying breath of indulgent, self-interested, self-mythologizing, over-the-top pop that harked back to the yesteryear of Michael Jackson, Madonna, and classic Hollywood stardom, and the other marked a new age of inward eccentricity, a quiet boldness, a generation who didn't really care about following in the tradition of great, indulgent, self-absorbed pop because they grew up on the internet and didn't really see the point. After all, life is short, and who really cares about following in the footsteps of the self-absorbed icons of yesteryear? We just want to have a good time before the world ends. In the June 2010 issue of The Atlantic, a prophetic article appeared titled The Last Pop Star. In it, the writer, James Parker, goes into detail about the real state of pop, this white-hot blank that can sizzle into materiality in the form of this body or that body, and that there's plenty to say about pop, but always, at its core, an ecstatic and superheated nothing. He goes on to talk about how Gaga, just like Kurt Cobain at the peak of his fame, is smart about controlling her own celebrity and getting her retaliation in first. Just like Kurt Cobain, who had himself wheeled on stage in a white lab coat and promptly passed out afterwards amid much speculation about his mental and physical health, Gaga got her retaliation in before the paparazzi and media could ruin her, playing a sick joke about the concept of death in the public eye. She took the idea of these famed blonde icons being hounded by the media and dying a morbid, disgusting death in private and turned it in on itself, instead showcasing the true effect of fame on an icon and killing herself off in front of the media, so they could see what their attacks and harassment had done to these famed divas. The public and media weren't able to kill off Lady Gaga. Until they did. And it's almost like Gaga knew it and knew what was coming. The way that the different background elements on the cover of Art Pop, even Gaga's own name and the album's title, have been cut and slashed, like some pop art vandal took a knife to the very elements of what makes Gaga Gaga and cut them apart. The prophetic media that she would put out in anticipation of the album, the film, the tweets, all anticipating the imminent breakdown of Lady Gaga, the performance art pieces that she would enact right on the streets with the paparazzi, as if she had finally given over her power to the harassers that she once supposedly had control of. That VMAs performance that seemed like a self-aware eulogy to the last 5 years of Gaga's career and the end of pop as we knew it since the 80s. And of course, the glittering, beautiful mess of an album that is art pop. A glorious, ecstatic, frenzied funeral march to the death of EDM and dance pop is a truly innovative genre. Thinking like the greatest of business minds, it's almost like Gaga planned her own death. One last hurrah for eccentric, stratospheric, self-absorbed pop so she could come back stronger and better than ever, but in the new style of relatable, down-to-earth pop. She would go on to revive her career and public image with work that was placed firmly in classic tradition, jazz, acting, musical theatre, and it would win her back some much needed critical acclaim and public respect. She would come back with the supposedly more down-to-earth Joanne, an album that was actually a lot more influential than people give it credit for. A lot of publications stating that it inspired the revival of traditional ballads and big vocals, as well as bringing the rootsy, down-to-earth instrumental pop record to the mainstream, inspiring acts like Kesha with Rainbow, Justin Timberlake with Man of the Woods, Kylie Minogue with Golden, Miley Cyrus with Younger Now, and Harry Styles with Sign of the Times. Social media fully reached its power in the second half of the decade, equalizing culture in a way that someone with an internet connection and no charisma or talent can be on the same level as Lady Gaga, fully shedding the fantasy of what pop used to be. Pop, that unattainable white-hot nothing, is now very much something. Numbers. Numbers on the screen, numbers on the charts, numbers of sales, numbers of followers, numbers of likes. Numbers is how important you are. Pop, as it used to be, this magical, untouchable creature that lives somewhere above this earth since the very inception of stardom, is no longer. Now we have a democratic culture, the internet, where anyone can reach a worldwide audience through a number of different avenues. And that's not a bad thing, it's the only reason that I'm speaking to you now. But we don't know what it makes pop either. What Lady Gaga represented at the beginning of her career, the superstar who was seemingly chosen by the system, is no longer, because at the beginning of the 2010s, she made us, the fans, part of the equation, and by making the internet part of the music industry machine, she simultaneously rejuvenated and eviscerated the system. She embodied and eviscerated the pop star. In the words of James Parker all the way back in 2010, and who will be post-Gaga? Nobody. She's finishing it off, each of her productions gleefully laying waste to another area of possibility. So let's just say it, she's the last pop star. After Gaga, the void.
Talk to us with your eyes. You look really pretty.